So, Pauline Vos come all the way from France to Sofia to tell us about how to choose our own adventure. I have no idea what she's going to tell us now, but I know it's going to be interactive. So please, a huge round of applause.
Thank you for coming to watch my talk. I know there's a very interesting sounding talk on Scala principles going on in the first track, so thanks for joining me. So a little bit about me first. I'm Pauline. I'm a senior backend developer in PHP, and I talk a lot, but mostly about Git. So if you have any questions about Git, you can come to me after the talk too. I work at Werkspot in Amsterdam, but I currently live in France to coach a team there. I like hip-hop, cocktails, and the internet. I have 1 cat and 3 plants that are dying, and I was a firefighter in the woods. But that's a story for another time. So today we're going to do, it's a talk, but it's an interactive talk. So I don't know if everyone knows what a choose your own adventure story is. Okay, not everyone. So a choose your own adventure story is it's a story, but it's interactive. So basically, you're reading the story, and you can make different decisions, and you flip to a different page based on the decision that you've made. And based on those decisions, the story becomes something else. So there's different endings to the story. So this talk is the same as that, except in talk format. So the story is this. The premise of the story is this. You are a consultant. You're hired to help DevCorp grow. So you're a software team consultant, and you're often hired into software teams to help them perform better, to help them grow, and things like that. So DevCorp started as a small startup, became successful, got some investors, and now they're trying to scale up. So you've been hired to help them do it. Before we enter DevCorp, I just want to let you know that obviously you as an audience are going to be making decisions. And I want you to know that sometimes you don't have to follow the happy path. There's no good or bad in this story. Obviously there's different types of endings. So you don't always have to choose make the decision that you think is the right one. You can also just choose something else and see what happens. All right? So let's enter DevCorp. Welcome. So happy to have you here. What's your name? Is it Slavi Trimonov or Sashka Fazwa? I hope I said that right. So, person at the reception asks you what your name is, and that's your first decision that you're going to be making. So to make the decision, I would like you to take your phones out and go to menti.com and punch in the code there, which is 169432. And if you're in the Hall 2 streaming room, you can obviously also join in on this, because it's just online. So go to menti.com, type it, punch in the code 169432, and option 1 is Savi, option 2 is Sashka. I have no idea how many people there are in the room. All right, I think 80 is a good number. So let's see who the winner is. And the winner is... All right, so you introduce yourself as Slavi Trimonov, and then someone comes down and comes to pick you up to meet you. And she says, Slavi, we're so glad to have you. My name is Lisa, and I'm a product manager at DevCorp. In fact, I'm the product manager for the dev team that you'll be working with, so I'm your product manager working directly with you. So she takes you upstairs to meet the team, and you decide to get that a good start to get familiar with the team is to have one-on-ones with each individual person. And in this particular team, it's a pretty team still. There's 3 developers, so you're going to meet all of them. First, you're going to meet Youssef. So this is Youssef. Youssef is the wizard.
So he's been there since the beginning of the company. He was the one that built the entire first MVP from scratch. He's responsible for setting up all the infrastructure, and all the information about that is in his head, so his bus factor is through the roof. Now, if you don't know what the bus factor is, it's essentially the factor someone has if when they get hit by a bus, the entire organization is screwed. So basically, if he gets hit by a bus tomorrow, the entire organization is screwed because he has all the knowledge in his head, okay? And he's usually fighting fires other people can't put out because he's the only one who knows how to fix certain problems. His catchphrase is obviously. He ends every sentence with obviously because to him everything is obvious, and he doesn't realize that maybe that's not the same for everyone else. All right, so the next person is Naomi. And Naomi is the up-and-comer, so she's still a bit of a junior, but she started 2 years ago already as an intern, but she's still kind of junior because she's mostly just fixing bugs. She hasn't really developed since she started, but through fixing bugs, she does have a very keen understanding of the domain and of all the product internals because she's poked around in the product for about 2 years. And she's a fast learner with strong opinions that don't always come out. And her catchphrase is, I'm out of stuff to do. So she's not really proactive in picking stuff up, and she just fixes whatever bug comes to her, and then she goes, well, now I don't have any more work, so please feed me more work. Then, Stefan is the heavyweight. So he's a recent hire. He has a lot of years of experience, and he's kind of like a big player in the conference scene. He's a conference organizer. He networks a lot. He knows most people behind the open source software that DevCorp uses. And his catchphrase is, I never get anything done around here. He feels like he has a lot of experience and a lot of opinions, but they don't really get used a lot. And he doesn't really get the opportunity to give much input at DevCorp. So let's continue with the rest of the day. So your first day is filled with meetings and introductions. You meet a lot of new people, you get introduced to all the different departments, and you get product explanations. So all seems relatively quiet, with the exception of Stefan grumbling from time to time. So he's grumpy, but you're kind of too busy the first day with all the introductions to really get a feel for what's going on. So you wonder what the problem is, and you go home. And after a good night's sleep, you return to the office. You hear him grumbling again, and it's his catchphrase. It's the, I never get anything done around here. So you think today is a good day to go talk to him and see what's up. And he says, our CI pipeline is so unstable. This is really slowing us down. He says that every time he implements something small, it takes him 5 minutes. Then he tries to deploy it, and the pipeline takes half an hour to an hour every time. And not only that, it keeps randomly failing. So sometimes when he implements something in 5 minutes, it can take him hours to actually get it out the door. So you ask him, well, what do you think a solution might be to this problem? And he says he has no idea. Because even with all of his years of experience, he's not the one who set the pipeline up. So he doesn't know how any of it works, and he doesn't have access to anything. So he says, you should probably ask Youssef. So you approach Youssef's desk, and he kind of jumps in his chair as if you've just woken him up from a deep slumber. And he hastily takes off his headphones. He says, look, Slavi, I really don't have the time right now. I've got requests coming from all sides. I've got Naomi, whose DevBox doesn't work, so she can't work, so I have to go fix that for her. And then I have Lisa, the product manager, pressuring me to do some reports for stakeholders because they want to see data for this meeting they have coming up. So I don't know what you think is more important here. Do you think it's more important to prioritize this pipeline, or can I get these really urgent requests done first? So that's your second decision you have to make. If you go on your phones again, you'll have the options there. So the first option is you press him to prioritize the pipeline. And the second option is tell him to handle his tasks first. I'll just leave it ticking to about 70, 80 again. And see what you decide. All right, so you think about it for a while, and you decide to tell him, he should prioritize the pipeline. He says, look, those requests may be really urgent, but you're going to keep them coming if you don't prioritize this and let developers have a good productive way of working. So you press to prioritize the pipeline and it gets to work. Lisa comes up to you. She's not happy. She says, Slavi, did you take Youssef off that order data export I asked him to do for the stakeholder meeting? I have that meeting in half an hour, and he's now doing something else when I expressly told him I needed that data. And you explain it to her. You explain that although this might be urgent to her, the entire software team is now affected, and productivity is not great with that pipeline. If it takes hours to get something out the door that they've implemented in 5 minutes, that's not a good look for anyone. And you also add that if she has these requests more often, maybe you can just prioritize an internal feature so that in the future she can run these exports herself. So you've explained your decision, and she says, okay, well, I guess that makes sense. I'll tell them we have to prioritize other work, and I'll send them the report later. So you're not in agreement. And as she turns away, she hesitates. And she says, okay, if we're going to be working on internal features as well, it might be a good idea to hire someone else. We're a pretty small team. So you have two options again. You can agree and hire new talent, or you can disagree and you try to work with the team you already have and try to make them more productive first. Ooh, voting is going a lot faster now. All right, let's see what you decide. All right, so you say, you know what, Lisa, that makes sense. I'm going to try and source someone else for the team, and I'll get back to you with an update as soon as I know more. All right. When you go and check on Naomi, whose DevBox was broken, she's actually figured out how to fix her own machine. So she got involved, and it took her a while, but now she knows how to fix her DevBox. So you smile and you go about your day. You continue. So in the following weeks, the team is shipping a lot more than they used to. They feel a lot more productive, and they prioritize and delivered the reporting feature that Lisa wanted. So that's also drastically reduced the amount of requests from Lisa that have come in, and has given the team a little bit more space to work on the stuff that they actually wanted to work on. So far, so good. You join a refinement session. So Lisa presents this feature that there's a demand for. She says there's a marketing campaign that's about to kick off, and basically it's for new traffic, so people who aren't customers yet, and they land on this landing page, and when they become customers, you want to offer them a loyalty system, so they can collect points, save points, and then get reductions on products and stuff later. So she wants that to be done before that marketing campaign obviously is launched, so that you get all that traffic in. And Naomi says, oh, I've recently read an article about a tool that does just that. And she types in the URL to the product, and she turns on the computer. And Stefan looks at it, and he says, okay, this looks good. It's a little pricey, but it looks like it could be a good fit. So he thanks Naomi for her input. But then he does say, maybe it's a good idea if we have that third-party software, if we abstract it away from the rest of our code base. So he draws out a little diagram really quickly, and he says, okay, so if we use this, if we don't use this third-party software directly, but instead we make our own interface, and we make an implementation in our own code base that's specific to this library, we have then abstracted away this library instead of using it directly everywhere in our code base, so we can swap it out more easily later if we ever want to. And Youssef bangs his head on the table, and he's like, you with the unnecessary complexity always. We don't know if we're ever going to be wanting to swap this out, and you're already wanting to put more time into making this more complex than it has to be for something that you don't know is ever going to happen. So you consider both of the options, and you can either go with Stefan's solution or agree with Youssef. So option one is you agree with Stefan's solution to abstract the third-party library away. Or you agree with Youssef that maybe it's a little bit premature optimization, and you don't want to abstract it away. Now keep in mind, you've all been making very good decisions so far. But you don't necessarily have to do that all the time. Okay, so option 2. I'm surprised. It feels like it didn't need to direct that at all. I was like, ooh, okay. So you agree with Youssef. You're like, I don't think it's really necessary. And Stefan's like, all right, suit yourself. But you do think that maybe this could turn out to be a pretty interesting feature to build. There's like, it's kind of a greenfield thing. It could be like a new service maybe. There's some design decisions to be made. So Stefan suggests maybe Naomi and I should pair on this one so she can learn a little bit and he can mentor a little bit. And Lisa, being a little less pressured from the business side of things because of the CI pipeline and the team being very productive lately, she says, okay, it does sound like a good learning opportunity. So you can go either agree with Lisa and Stefan that you think they should pair on this, or you say, you know what, don't pair. This feature is high priority and this marketing campaign is about to be launched. We need to get it live ASAP. All right, so option 1 is you recommend that they pair, and option 2, you say, nah, not necessary. Let's get this out the door, give it to one of our more senior people. Let's get it done as quickly as possible. All right. I'll try not to influence you anymore. Option 1. You think they should pair on this. You say, you know what, I agree that there's some space and there's some time now, there's not as much pressure, so maybe it's a good idea to pair on this. And Naomi is visibly, she gets a little glint in her eye and she says, I'm on it. And she enthusiastically rolls her desk chair over to Stefan's desk and they get to work. All right, so as time goes on, you figure that after about 2 or 3 months, it's time to check back into the team and with the team again. So you have another set of one-on-ones. So first you talk to Youssef, and he says he's really glad that you pressed him on the pipeline issue because he's much less stressed out. He's getting less and less requests from developers and Lisa alike because they can handle their own stuff a lot better now. And so he gets more space to work on the things that he thinks are important instead of just fighting fires all the time. You talk to Stefan, and he's less happy. You made the decision to not go with his architectural decision of abstracting third-party libraries away, and he, after a long time, has decided, I'm out of here. Anytime I use my experience, anytime I give you my expert opinion, it's just swept away and nobody listens to me. So he says, sorry, but I'm moving on. Meanwhile, Naomi is pretty happy because she's been pairing. So she finally feels after 2 years that she's getting more challenging work and she's developing her skills. So she's a lot happier. All right. So on your way home that night, you reflect. You think that maybe you should find a new Stefan, and how long is that going to take? How much is that going to cost? What will that do to the budget? What will that do to our velocity to miss someone for a long time and have to reintroduce someone new to replace them? He does think that this mentorship dynamic is really paying off. Unfortunately, Stefan's just left, but Naomi was really happy with that, so maybe you should get a bit more of that mentorship dynamic going on in the future. And you're pretty happy because you're delivering value at a pretty good pace, which wasn't the case before at all. So that's a bit of a reflection moment for you. And you get to work the next day, and Lisa's waiting. And she says, okay, there's a problem. We got some calls in from a few users that are having trouble enrolling into our loyalty system. So what's going on is there's new users coming onto the landing page and they try to enroll and they get redirected and then everything just breaks. So you're missing a whole bunch of users, and it's not a great look, obviously, for first-time customers to just land on something that's completely broken. So she says this is pretty critical right now. All right, thanks for the update. Before you do that, I also have an update for you. So I've been looking for someone because you wanted me to hire someone new. So his name is Mike, and he's pretty experienced, so he should really be able to drive us forward in the future. And she's excited. But having said that, I say Stefan has decided to resign. So obviously that's a bit of an oof moment. She's excited that there's someone experienced joining, but also sad that Stefan, who has just been hired, has already left. All right, so Yusuf has been doing some debugging on the critical issue, and he's figured out what's happening. And it seems that we've misconfigured one of the proxies, he says. So you built this service for the loyalty system, and the proxies are one of the proxies are misconfigured. So a part of the traffic is not being redirected to the right place. So he says you could just manually change the configuration on production and just fix it. And you think, is this common practice here? So you ask him, is this normal in as little judgment as you can muster? And he says, sure, we all do that because we feel like we have a competent team of people who we trust, all right? So we trust everyone to not screw up. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't just edit things on production, especially if it's a critical and we need to get something out the door really quick. So you have two options here again. You say, you're a smart bunch of professionals. I trust you as well, and you want to show the team that you trust them. Or you say, look, smart as you are, people make mistakes, and this goes through the pipeline just like everything else. So option one is agree, fix it as soon as possible because it's a critical and because you trust the team so much. Or option two, no. As good as you might be, everything goes through the pipeline. Seems like a more difficult decision. I like watching how quickly the numbers go up because I feel more slowly they go up, apparently the harder the decision is to make. This one's really slow. Let's go. See what you do. Option two, you say people make mistakes. So you can be super smart, but sometimes things go wrong, and we can't have that happen. And actually, Lisa says that's fair. She may have responded differently had you not fixed the CI pipeline before, but she says it's a good thing we have a workable pipeline now, and we can actually run something through it and be confident that it's going to be live in about 20 minutes. So you're pretty happy. And the next Monday, there's a new hire. So you introduce Mike to the team. You say, team, meet Mike. He's an experienced engineer who should really increase our output. It's a shame that Stefan is gone, but maybe he can help with the mentoring a little bit as well. And he says, hey team, I can't wait to dive into the domain and the product and start helping you deliver. And Naomi, confident now after a few pairing sessions and this culture of mentoring being more strongly embodied within the team, says, I can help you with that. Why don't we pair up and I'll introduce you to the product internals and everything. So they sit together and she shows him the whole stack and she shows him how the product works. And so that's him introduced to the team. Ooh. Now that afternoon, Lisa returns from a meeting with tech management, who is not happy with the third-party library that you introduced, because not only is it quite expensive, they now have new requirements for it, and it turns out that it's not very flexible. So you can't really build onto that library as much as you would like. So she asks you, is there an alternative for it? Naomi says, let's do some research and see what we come up with. So she takes a few hours, she comes up with different options, she documents everything, and she gives you a proposal. She calls the team together, and she says, so there's actually a much cheaper alternative as it turns out. Maybe you should have done this research before. But But yeah, so it seems to be more flexible as well. So Mike says, okay, let's get to it. And they sit down. And Naomi walks up to your desk. And she says, so remember when we decided not to abstract this library away? Yeah, it's Youssef from the other side of the room. I'll take full credit for that one and for making Stefan resign. Thanks, Youssef. Sorry, everyone, he says. Oof, well, let's try to get this out of the way ASAP anyway. So that week is a little more slow than it has been. The dev team is working really hard on removing the third-party library, but obviously they were fined for a certain amount of work, and now it turns out there's usages everywhere, and you keep finding new ways that this party is intertwined with your code base. So Lisa seems frustrated because she was expecting certain type or a certain amount of delivery time, and you're exceeding it, and she doesn't really know when everything's going to be finished. So the dev team is just stressing out as well. So it looks like we'll be stuck with this expensive license for a while. All right. A few days later, Youssef is on vacation when a critical issue occurs again, and Lisa comes to you panicking. So something's broken on production, she says. We're losing orders because users are creating an account and then they're supposed to be getting an account confirmation email, but it never comes. So they can't actually use their account that they've just made. So that's another bad look for first-time users, right? So Naomi's listening, and she tries to reproduce the issue straight away. She says, I see what's going on here. She has a keen eye for the infrastructure now because she's been pairing a lot. And there's something wrong with the email service, she says, and that Youssef has shown her before how to fix it. And she brings the service back up. She says, should be back up in a few minutes. And after she's done, she walks Mike through what she's done. So now Mike knows how that service works. That night, let me check the clock because I've just heard. Okay, we're good. That night, you reflect on the few past months, and it's been almost half a year, so your time at DevCorp has almost come to an end. The board of investors are coming to visit soon and tell you their verdict. You start to feel a little nervous because you wonder if you've made a positive enough impact. The next day, you take Naomi aside for a chat, and she says, what's up, as she plops down opposite you. She looks pretty happy. And you explain to her that she's really stepped up recently. You think her knowledge about product internals is very, very invaluable, and she's even passed that on to a new teammate as well. She's picked up a lot of new skills, and she took initiative when a critical occurred. She had the confidence to step up and fix something, which she wouldn't have done before, probably. So you're really happy with how she's been evolving. So you tell her that's why you're happy to offer her a raise. We appreciate your progress, you say, and you're keen to see how she'll develop in the future. And her eyes light up and she thanks you. A few weeks later, you step into the meeting room with a nice view and the big conference table and welcome the board of investors. Today, you hear how you've done and if DevCorp has improved or not under your leadership. Lisa closes door behind you, and she's a little sweaty, and she's visibly nervous. So you continue. The final verdict is that the board is happy with the improvements you've made. So why is that? So they say that you've been able to keep up with demand. We're not delivering value at ideal speeds yet because of the pipeline has been fixed. However, there was that issue with the loyalty program before, so that slowed you down a little bit. They did say that you've lost an extremely costly hire, Stefan, who had just been hired, so we're going to have to replace him now, and we don't understand how he was such a recent and such an expensive hire, and we lost him somehow. They do say that you've managed to keep most of the team together. Naomi's stayed and Youssef has stayed, and you've developed their skills further. And the new hire you did was expensive, but it seems that he was onboarded quite smoothly because Naomi was pairing with him, showing him how the product works. So good call there. He seemed to have hit the ground running. But we've been bleeding money. What happened to the technology budget? This is unacceptable. You've made this new hire and you've lost a lot of time on that that third-party library that was super expensive, that's been live a lot longer than it should have been, so they're not happy about that. But they say the speed at which that critical outage was fixed recently is commendable. So thank you, Naomi, for that. You may have had a very different ending had Naomi not known what to do. So that's that. Overall, you've done pretty well. Thank you for playing. And special thanks to my coworker Thijs for telling me about Twine, which is software you can use to create your own choose your own adventure type of game, timeline, browser-based thing. Werkspot for the use of the Menti license, which you used for voting. My friend Naomi for playing Naomi, and my coworkers for playing the other characters. And finally, hackconf for inviting me. Thank you.
That was awesome. So we have a couple minutes for questions. Any questions? Nope? Sure.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm just curious, what are the other endings of the story?
Right. Okay, so I thought I put a QR code in here, but I'll just bring it up. If you use this QR code, I've put the whole story online somewhere so you can play around in it. But there are a few different endings. If you would have, for instance, okay, so Stefan was gone already, but if you wouldn't have paired with Naomi, she wouldn't have known what to do when that second outage happened. Mike hadn't been onboarded to the platform at all, to the product, so nobody would have known what to do, and that sets a variable called hell for when all hell breaks loose, because essentially you would have had to wait for Youssef to come back until that critical was fixed, and you would have been pretty much out of business for like 2 weeks. So that's the absolute worst case scenario. And then there's about 4 or 5 other storylines as well with different ranges of terribleness. This is like the second tier of goodness. There's like one or two decisions that were bad, and the rest was all pretty good. So.
Anyone else? Sure.
What was the second decision that was bad? So it was clear that keeping options open with the third party code was supposed to be there, right? But what was the other bad decision?
So there was that one. There was not pairing. There was manually editing the production configuration, because then afterwards Naomi would have seen that and gone, because it would have been fine had he done it, but she would have seen it and copied that behavior while he was on vacation and would have broken something, and then you would have had another critical, and then you could have either berated her or reassured her it was okay, and if you berated her, her confidence would have just plummeted and she would have resigned in the end. So you wouldn't have had much of a team left. Also, if you would have never paired, then Mike, the new hire, would have never been onboarded very smoothly. And he would have just been a really expensive hire who was just sitting around. And the board would have been like, what did you hire this guy for? So.
Hey.
Hey.
One, maybe 2 questions. So first, a lot of this relies on tribal knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah. Why? I mean, people are pairing, people are being shown stuff, but you never mentioned like this has been documented exactly nowhere. Because then you have like an index of stuff, compendium of stupidity, if you will. Like if something breaks, you know what to look and how to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. So the documentation thing, yeah, I could have put that in there. I tried to make it more about like a knowledge sharing type of thing. Okay. So like, yeah, he never you're talking about mostly Youssef and like.
No, I mean the whole thing, like we are pairing, we are onboarding, that's fine. And suddenly she knows how to fix it because somebody showed her.
Yes.
But if she wasn't there, and that was documented nowhere, again, we were at the problem.
Exactly.
Okay. And the second thing, I kind of didn't catch this when Stefan was suggesting the refactoring and the abstraction. Did he come up with numbers? Any kind of numbers? Like we have cheaper alternatives, or this is going to cost
No, and that's also why
he was just deving it.
He was like, well, maybe in the future we need to do something else.
He was deving it.
Yeah.
Basically being a developer. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and Youssef was like, how do you know that's ever going to happen? This seems perfect as a solution. So.
One last question.
Thank you. Since I have only one wrong question, I really would like to know what happened with Stefan if they accept his decision, because I choose to have the abstraction.
Yeah, to
what
me, like
happens
what,
with him?
what happened to him after he left DevCorp?
No.
'Cause I haven't written that path.
No. He suggests the abstraction.
Yeah.
What happens if the team accept to use the
Right.
abstraction?
Okay. So there's he's a little well, he's a very opinionated man. So there's a couple ways you could have lost him. So one of the ways is that one. The other way to lose him is if you didn't let him pair. If you would have taken his suggestion and let him pair, he would have stayed on. And you would have had more of a budget because you didn't need to grab into your recruiting budget to find an alternative. And also later, huh? Yeah, and it would have been much faster to swap out the library. So that would have also had an impact on your budget and your velocity.
But is that the best outcome? With parents, of course.
Yes, yeah, because then the board of investors would have said like, wow, we're producing at speeds that we've never had before, and our budget is great. So you did good.
Great. So we're just on time. One more time. Thank you, Pauline, very much.
Thank you.